My name is Rachel. I am 22 years old. I live in a small house with my mom. My dad left when I was 6. I do not remember him well. He moved to another city and never came back. Since then, it has just been me and my mom. My mom works at a local office. She wakes up early and comes home late. She is always tired. She does not smile much. She does not talk to me kindly. Most of the time, she is angry. She shouts at me if the house is not clean. She gets mad if I forget to buy milk. Even small things make her upset. When I was a child, I used to wait at the window for her. I made little pictures for her. I wanted to make her happy, but she never looked at the pictures. She never said thank you. She just said, "Don't leave things on the table." I picked them up and said nothing. I stopped drawing after that. At school, I was quiet. I did my homework. I didn't make trouble. My teachers said I was a good student. But when I came home, my mom only asked, "Why didn't you get an A?" If I got an A, she said, "You should always get A." I never heard "good job" or "I'm proud of you." I wanted her to say those words, but she never did. One time in high school, I got sick. I had a fever and a bad cough. I stayed in bed all day. When my mom came home, she didn't ask how I was. She looked at the dirty dishes in the sink. She said, "You could still clean something." I didn't answer. I just looked at the wall. My body hurt, but my heart hurt more. Now I work at a small office near our home. I take phone calls and type on the computer. The job is not hard, but I feel tired every day. Not because of the work, but because of how I feel inside. I try to do my best, but nothing feels enough. Each evening I walk home and take a deep breath before opening the door. I never know what mood my mom will be in. Sometimes she is silent. Sometimes she is angry. I say hi, and she says, "What took you so long?" Or, "Did you buy the right rice this time?" I just say yes and go to my room. My room is small. There is a bed, a desk, and one window. It is the only place I feel calm. I sit on the bed and look at the street below. I see people walking, talking, smiling. I wonder if their homes are warm. I wonder if their moms ask them how their day was. One Saturday morning, I made pancakes. I wanted to do something nice. I cleaned the table, made coffee, and waited. When my mom came into the kitchen, I smiled. I said, "Good morning." I made breakfast. She looked at the food and said, "Don't you know I don't eat this?" You never listen. Then she walked away. I stood there for a few seconds. My hands felt cold. I looked at the pancakes. I didn't feel hungry anymore. I sat down and ate one slowly. The house was quiet, but it didn't feel peaceful. It felt heavy. Sometimes I try to remember if she was always this way. I remember one birthday when I was little. I was 7. She brought me a cake. I was so happy. I remember the blue candles. I remember her smile that day. It was small, but it was real. That is the last time I remember her smiling at me like that. I asked her once, "Mom, do you love me?" She said, "What kind of question is that? I work hard for this house, don't I?" I didn't ask again. I wanted to hear yes. I wanted her to hold me and say it clearly, but she didn't. One evening, I came home late. My friend Claire had invited me to her place. We watched a movie and ate snacks. It felt nice. Her mom gave us juice and laughed with us. When I left, she said, "Come again any time." I said thank you and smiled. It felt strange to hear kind words from a mom. When I got home, my mom was waiting. She said, "You're always running around. This is not a hotel." I said, "I was at Claire's house." She said, "That's not your home. Don't stay out so late." I went to my room. I didn't argue, but in my heart, I felt tired. That night I lay in bed and stared at the ceiling. I thought, why is she always angry? I didn't do anything wrong. I help with the house. I have a job. I don't ask for much. I just want her to say one nice thing, one soft word, one smile. But she does not give that. At work, my boss is kind. He says, "Good work," when I do something well. My coworkers smile and say, "Good morning." It feels nice. I wish home felt like that too. I wish I didn't feel scared to open the front door. I wish I didn't feel small inside my own house. One day after work, I saw a mother and daughter in the store. The daughter picked a candy bar and showed it to her mom. Her mom laughed and said, "Okay, just one." They smiled at each other. It was simple, but it made my eyes feel wet. I turned away quickly. I walked home slowly. My heart felt heavy. I passed a small tree. A bird sat on it and sang. I stopped and listened. For 1 minute, I felt peaceful. I wished I could stay in that moment. I didn't want to go home, but I had to. When I got home, my mom was in the kitchen. She looked at me and said, "Where were you?" I said, "Just at the store." She said, "Next time, tell me first. I don't like waiting." I said, "Okay." Then I walked to my room. I sat on my bed and took off my shoes. My feet hurt, but my chest hurt more. I looked out the window again. The bird was gone. Before I continue my story, I want to ask you something. Where are you listening from? Sometimes I wonder if someone out there really understands me. Just knowing you're here gives me strength. The next day, I got up early. I made toast and eggs. I left a plate for my mom. I did not wait for her. I just got ready and left for work. It was cold outside. The sky was gray. I walked slowly, thinking about nothing and everything. At work, my friend Emma asked, "Are you okay?" I smiled and said, "Yes, just tired." She said, You always look tired. I laughed a little and said, maybe I need more sleep. But it wasn't sleep I needed. It was peace. That afternoon, the office was busy. I had many phone calls. I made a small mistake and my boss said, "It's okay. Just fix it." He didn't shout. He didn't make me feel bad. I fixed it and said, "Thank you." I wished my mom talked to me like that. After work, I passed a flower shop. I saw a small yellow flower. It looked soft and bright. I bought one. It was not expensive. I held it carefully and took it home. I put it in a glass on the table. When my mom saw it, she said, "Why waste money on this?" I didn't answer. I just looked at the flower. That evening, I stayed in my room. I read a book. My mom watched TV. She didn't talk to me. The house was quiet, but not in a good way. It felt like a place where people lived, but didn't love. The next morning, I woke up early again. I cleaned the kitchen. I swept the floor. I washed the cups. I wanted her to see I cared. But when she came in, she said, "Why didn't you clean the table?" I looked at the table. There was one small crumb. I said, "Sorry, I'll clean it now." She walked away without a word. I sat down and held my hands in my lap. I didn't want to cry. I didn't want to feel weak, but my eyes were full. I blinked fast and stood up. I cleaned the table again, though it was already clean. One Sunday, I went to the park alone. I sat on a bench and watched people walk by. A small girl ran to her mother and said, "Look, a duck!" Her mother laughed and said, "Yes, I see it." They sat together, close and happy. I looked down at my hands. I thought, why can't I have that too? I stayed at the park for 2 hours. The sun came out. I felt the light on my face. It was warm. For a short time, I didn't think about home. I just sat, quiet, with the sound of birds around me. When I got home, my mom said, "Where have you been?" I said, "Just the park." She said, "You didn't even call." I said, "I didn't know I had to." She looked at me and said, "Don't speak like that to me." I said, "I didn't mean anything bad." She didn't answer. She went to her room. That night, I lay in bed and looked at the ceiling. I whispered, "Please just be kind." I said it so soft that even I could barely hear it. But I hoped someone, somewhere, heard me. The next week, I stayed quiet. I did my work. I did the chores. I came home early. I made dinner. I smiled when I had to. But my heart felt tired. My hands moved, but I felt empty. One evening, I made soup. I put 2 bowls on the table. My mom sat down and started eating. She didn't say thank you. She didn't say it was good. She just ate. I looked at her. I said, "Do you like the soup?" She said, "It's fine. Don't ask too much." I looked down. I said, "Okay." After dinner, I washed the dishes. My back hurt. I leaned on the sink. I thought, why does she never see my effort? I didn't want her to praise me every day. Just once. Just a kind word. Later, I heard her on the phone. She laughed with someone. Her voice was light. It sounded nice. I stood by the door and listened. I felt strange. I thought, why can't she laugh with me like that? One day, I came home from work and saw her sitting in the living room. I said, "Hi." She said, "Did you pay the phone bill?" I said, "Yes, last week." She said, "Good." That was it. No welcome. No smile. I walked to my room. I looked at the mirror. My face looked tired. My eyes looked small. I thought, is this who I am now? I used to be more happy. I used to laugh. Now, I only wait. I wait for her to see me. At work, Emma invited me to her house again. I said yes. We made pasta and laughed at silly things. Her dad made a joke. Her mom gave me a blanket when I said I was cold. I said, "Thank you." She said, "Of course, dear." I felt warm, not just in my body, but in my heart. When I left, I almost cried. I said, "Thanks for the evening." Emma said, "Come again soon." I said, "I will." On the way home, I walked slowly. I didn't want to go back to the cold air of my own house. When I got home, my mom was watching TV. I said, "I'm back." She didn't look up. She said, "You're always going out. This is not a club." I didn't answer. I went to my room and sat on the bed. I wanted to ask her, "Why do you talk to me like this?" But I was scared. I didn't want her to get more angry. So I said nothing. That night, I dreamed I was a small girl again. I was standing in the kitchen with a picture in my hand. My mom took it, smiled, and hugged me. I woke up with wet eyes. I knew it was just a dream. It was not real. One Friday, I came home early. I made tea and sat in the kitchen. My mom came in. I said, "Would you like some tea?" She looked at me and said, "Did you clean the floor?" I said, "Yes." She said, "Then fine. I'll have tea." She sat down. I gave her a cup. We sat in silence. Then I said, "Do you remember when I was small? I made pictures for you." She looked at me and said, "No, I don't remember." I said, "That's okay." I looked at my tea. My hands felt cold. I said, "I just want to talk sometimes. That's all." She didn't say anything. She took a sip of her tea and looked at the wall. That night I didn't cry. I just felt tired. I didn't feel angry at her. I felt sad. Sad that I had so much love to give, but nowhere to put it. A few days later, I got sick. My throat hurt and I had a fever. I stayed in bed after work. I was cold and weak. I didn't say anything to my mom. I didn't think she would ask. At dinner time, she knocked on my door. I said, "I'm not hungry." She opened the door and said, "Why are you in bed?" I said, "I think I have a fever." She looked at me, then said, "You should take medicine." Then she walked away. I wanted her to touch my forehead. I wanted her to say, "You need rest. I'll bring you soup." But she didn't. She went back to the living room. That night, I drank water and took a pill. I pulled my blanket tight and closed my eyes. My body hurt, but what hurt more was the silence from her. I didn't want much, just a little care. The next morning, she put a cup of tea outside my door. She didn't say anything, just left it there. I opened the door slowly and saw it. I picked it up and looked at the warm steam. It wasn't much, but for some reason, it made my chest feel warm. Maybe she did care, even if she didn't say it. I sat on my bed and drank it slowly. It didn't fix everything, but it gave me one soft moment in many hard days. That was the only kindness I felt that week. Later that day, I went to work even though I was still sick. I didn't want to stay home. At work, Emma said, "You should rest." I said, "I'm okay." But I wasn't. My head hurt, my body was weak, and I missed something I never really had. When I got home, I sat in the kitchen. My mom came in. I said, "I think I need to see a doctor." She said, "Doctors cost money. You're young. You'll be fine." I said, "Okay," and didn't ask again. That night, I felt cold inside. Not just in my body, but deep in my heart. I thought about moving out, but I didn't make much money. I couldn't live alone yet. I still needed this house, even if it didn't feel like a home. One weekend, Emma asked if I wanted to go with her to visit her grandmother. I said yes. We took a bus and went to a small town. Her grandmother lived in a tiny white house with flowers in the yard. She hugged Emma and then hugged me too. We had tea and cookies. She asked me where I worked and what I liked to do. I told her I liked reading. She said, "That's lovely. You must be very smart." I smiled. Just hearing that made me feel seen. I felt like I mattered. Later she said, "You have kind eyes." I looked down. I didn't know what to say. No one had said that to me before. Not even once. When we left, she gave me a scarf. She said, "It might get cold." I said, "Thank you." On the bus, I held the scarf in my lap. It smelled like her home, soft and warm. I almost cried. When I got home, my mom didn't ask where I had been. She just looked at me and said, "Take your shoes off at the door." I said, "Okay." Then I went to my room. I lay on the bed with the scarf next to me. I thought, why is love so easy for some people and so hard for others? I didn't know the answer. Days passed. I went to work. I cleaned the house. I made dinner. My mom stayed the same. Cold, quiet, sometimes sharp with her words, sometimes silent like I wasn't even there. Then one evening, I came home and found her sitting in the dark. The lights were off. She didn't move when I opened the door. I said, "Mom?" She didn't answer right away. I turned on the light. She looked tired. Her face was pale. I asked, "Are you okay?" She said, "I had a bad day." I said, "Do you want some tea?" She said, "Yes. Please." It was the first time in years that she said please to me. I made tea and gave it to her. She held the cup with both hands and looked down. Then she said, "You're a good girl, Rachel." My heart stopped for a second. I didn't know what to say. I wanted to cry, but I just said, "Thank you." We sat in silence for a while. Then she said, "I'm sorry I don't say that more." I looked at her. Her eyes were red. She looked older than before. I said, "It's okay." But it wasn't. Not really. Still, it felt like something. A small change. The next day, she didn't say much again. She was quiet like always. But I saw her put her cup in the sink after tea. She never used to do that. I noticed it. That week, I felt a little stronger. I didn't feel happy yet, but I didn't feel so invisible either. I still came home with a quiet heart, but now I had a little hope. One night, I wrote a short message on a small paper. I put it on the kitchen table. It said, "I love you, Mom." I didn't sign it. I just left it there. The next day, it was gone. She didn't say anything, but that night, she made my favorite soup. She didn't tell me why, but I knew. Sometimes people love you, but they don't know how to show it. Sometimes they carry pain you can't see. Maybe my mom was one of those people. I still wish she was kind more often. I still wish she said soft words without me asking. But now, I understand a little more. She may not change much, but I can still be me. I can still be kind, even if she isn't. And one day, when I have a family of my own, I will remember this. I will say kind things. I will smile. I will ask, "How was your day?" I will listen. I will hug my child when they feel small. I will be the mother I always wished I had. If you liked my story, please like, comment, and share. More simple and emotional stories are coming soon.